Hello, hi, it's your host, Fury. Today we're going to talk about firearms in Fortunia. Luckily, when writing down the description, writing down the research and doing the list to do for my last video about the soul matter, the 5 energies, it was much easier to find information on this. Much faster, I should say. So I had the time to actually draw some of the things that I was going to write before I started the video. So today we have here Firearms in Fortunia. So, as you can see, I decided to take maybe about 10, maybe 20 minutes to just draw out a few firearms. Draw a few so that I would have a bit more time where instead of having to draw during the video and make them not very well drawn guns, this time I could actually make them rather alright. Now I'm not going to say this is the same level of quality that's seen in the manga because it's far from it. But that's been a while. And I'm rusty. But hey, at least this, but hey. It's good enough that you get the point. Doesn't need to be perfect, but and maybe, just maybe I'll decide to improve if, maybe I will decide to get some more practice. Maybe I will decide to not be so rusty. In any case, Firearms in Fortunia. Now the first one we're going to talk about is the high presence of the, well, of course, the military shotgun designs. Now all three of these were meant to be the same arm, same firearm, from different angles. Now we have here, this is the top view of the shotgun. Now as you can see, you got a lock here, you got a pin here. Now I'm going to show off this little can you see, guys, 3 sides. Now normally a hammer would only come out with from one spot, but these have 3 sides to the hammer that's pulled out. This is because, of course, this isn't a, well, this here is not actually a black powder gun. It's not any kind of powder. This is based off of magic, and as such, it doesn't need to quite have this proper Earth-like design because the design can pretty much just be for aesthetically pleasing. As you can see, it's broken open, and the shot shell is loaded into the single barrel. The hammer is cut, and then the trigger is pulled and fires the shot. Now there are a variety of shots. With different effects. These are such as acid rounds. Oh man, I need to cycle my pencil. Get some more graphite. Okay, let's try this again. Acid rounds. There can also be these acid rounds. They can go of course, filled with acid, and they burn the target. You know, if an acid round were to land in you, well, then most likely it would not at first burn so much. But if the acid was allowed to release, if it stayed in your body, it would begin to dissolve at your internal organs. Because this is a magic acid. Magical acid that can, of course, burn your body much more effectively, can dissolve more effectively than maybe an earth acid like sulfuric acid. Oh yes, this acid hurts even more than sulfuric acid. That may be hard to believe that such an acid could exist, but You must remember that this is magic. The next type of round I will discuss is the how about the rubber rounds? These rounds will bounce. They can bounce off of a target. Bounce off of one target, and then boof, hit another target. Now, these rubber rounds can be used to go around walls to make a ricochet effect. Now, a third kind of round that can be shot out of these guns. Let's call it the piercer round. The reason why it's called the piercer round is because, of course, it pierces. Let's say not necessarily piercing as in leaving a hole through it, but rather penetrating without leaving a hole. Let's say we have a wall, and then we have an enemy behind the wall. Maybe not an enemy, let's not call them the enemy. Let's say we have a goblin. Let's be very specific about what we are shooting. There's a goblin behind a wall. Levi would like to strike the goblin, but that wall is, well, it's a pretty good wall. He doesn't want to damage it, so pierce round. Now the thing about a pierce round is that it will penetrate the wall. Without performing any damage to the wall. It just becomes incorporeal when it goes through the obstruction, and then when it comes out the other side, it becomes corporeal, so that it can strike a target. Now, all three of these are rounds that are used by Levi. Acid rounds, rubber rounds, and piercer rounds for various purposes. Just like there is this shotgun. But what is the shotgun used for? Aren't there any shotgun shots? Yes, acid, rubber, piercer. These are not, of course, the only three shots, but these are the only three that I could, well, reliably confirm, other than, of course, the basic shot that one would expect to come from a firearm, the standard lead bullet. Of course, you have lead bullets, then you have these other three, which I was able to confirm were present in the manga. There may be others. I'm quite confident that there are more rounds which were shot, but in my research, I, of course, couldn't confirm them. I couldn't find evidence that any others existed. The only clues I would have are the fact that I know I created more. Of course, I know I made some more. I just don't really remember what I put in. After all, my research can only go so far. Then, of course, we're now going to talk about the standard issue. This is, of course, a standard issue for the army soldiers. The soldiers who are in the military will, of course, receive a single arrow shotgun to use. Now, it isn't a very long-range weapon, and in order to encourage closer skirmishes, closer battles, just the same as most often basic lead shot is put in this. Wrong. Acid rounds are too expensive. So our rubber rounds, our piercer rounds, they're simply too expensive to produce. They're not worth equipping a whole army with, as are more advanced firearms. As such, simple single-barreled shotgun is the used arm. However, there are some elite soldiers which Levi has given rifles. Rifles that, of course, acid rounds, rubber rounds, piercer rounds. Because these are elite soldiers, and as such Levi can afford to spend more money on the production of advanced rounds. Because this is an advanced weapon. You see, a single-barrel shotgun is not very difficult to produce. It's not advanced, it's not very special. It simply is the hammer's release, and the barrel. The hammer strikes a shell which ignites the powder and fires a projectile out of a smooth-bored barrel. Simply, there is no big no very expensive, minute parts that need to be produced, nor is it something that was as advanced as we have here on Earth in 2021. After all, single-barreled shotguns were invented how long ago was it? I do believe these were around during the American Civil War here on Earth. Of course, this time, let's see, maybe 1862, perhaps was a year. They're not as advanced as the weapons that we have here in the modern age. As such, they're much cheaper to produce. Because they're not as advanced. Of course, I shall not compare Jericho to Earth, just as I shall not compare apples to oranges. In terms of talking about the culture and modern day inventions, there is quite a bit of difference, but the comparison between the cost to produce different firearms, most likely that would be a discussion that could work, a comparison that could work. The rifles are entirely made, these rifles here are, of course, made out of wood with a iron barrel. Sometimes the iron is steel, sometimes a steel barrel. It depends on the quality of the iron nearby. If it's high quality iron, it will need to be steel, but if it is not high quality iron, of course, a steel barrel. Note, the 5-sided hammer, and of course, the loader. Yes, bullets put into here, hammer is pulled, firing pin. It's not much more advanced than the shotgun. It is more advanced, yes. The stock butt is more difficult to produce, and of course the barrel does need to be rifled. But overall, the mechanisms inside are largely the same, to minimize the cost of equipping such soldiers. And of course, the last firearm I shall discuss is the single-hand firearms owned by Levi. You can see this is the LVCE, right here, LVCE, pronounced lice, or lace, depends on who you ask. I like to say lace. Now, as you can see, it's a very square design. Of course, the symbol. What does the symbol mean? Well, in my research, I couldn't find exactly what the symbol meant, only that the pistol did look like this. Fortunately, I was actually able to find an image of Levi's pistols as such. This was the only one that I was able to find an actual reference image for instead of just a written description of, which I'm glad for. So I was able to draw it much more in accurate detail than I was with the others. It's good. Though, I will say that I know that there's a description where this does include a scope on the back. A small scope to magnify the viewing, so that there can be higher accuracy, though I couldn't find an image of it with the scope on, only with the scope off, taken off of it. As you can see, Levi's hand pistol is a rather square design, with an interestingly also rather boxy handle. There's a plate on the back of an unknown material, though the rest of the gun is made of Leviathan construct. With a handle, also, the handle is Leviathan construct on the inside, with, of course, hand grips. Now this pistol is unique in that instead of shooting powder rounds, as these, well, I shouldn't say powder rounds, instead of shooting a physical bullet, it fires energy blasts. Think of it like a, what is it, like those blasters from Star Wars, is it? Do they shoot raw energy blasts? No, that's gas. How about Star Trek phasers? Oh yes, those are non-physical shot. Think of the shot that comes from this, similar to a Star Trek phaser. It is a light-based attack, though it is a very intense light, a very high radiation. Though it is radiation, there is no stopping power, there is no inertia that the bullet has, only, well, radiant energy. As such, these shots will not cause a damage to any targets which can withstand high heat, high energy absorption, such as a iron plate, which could probably handle being shot with this, because it's iron. It will not, as long as it doesn't melt, it will be fine. And it will only melt if it's shot in the same place multiple times, as opposed to a human flesh, which will, well, human flesh will be burned by this. And if the hair is caught by a beam, it might catch on fire, and that would be very painful. These shots could probably even melt a bone if they were able to penetrate that deep, which, against a regular human, Levi's shots certainly could penetrate all the way to bone, and their bones would be melted. A horrible death, to be sure. But in battle, well, you gotta do what you gotta do. So this, of course, has been a summary of three of the most well-known designs of firearms in Fortunia. Thank you for coming to watch, and if you just don't decide to come back next time, even if you do decide to come back next time, even if you do decide to come back here every day, there's still one thing that all of you should have in common. And that is to stay zesty.